Good morning. We have general questions. Question number 1, Lewis MacDonald.
To ask the Scottish Government when it will provide a substantive response to written question 16703 regarding the First Minister's engagements in Aberdeen in June 2013, which received a holding answer from the Cabinet Secretary for Culture and External Affairs on the 10th of September.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
The parliamentary question was answered on the 21st of November 2013 and the delay was due to an administrative error.
Lewis MacDonald.
I am grateful to the Cabinet Secretary. There is nothing like an oral question to concentrate the mind. I and my MSP colleagues and the MP for Aberdeen South would have been delighted to welcome the Government's contribution to the Pound for Piper Fund at the time, if the First Minister had seen fit to tell us about it then, or indeed in any of the weeks after the Aberdeen Donside by-election and before the anniversary of the Piper Alpha disaster. I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary can confirm whether or not there has been a breach of the Ministerial Code in this instance, and if so, whether an apology will be issued by her or by any other responsible minister.
Cabinet Secretary.
There's been no breach. 920 says private offices should, where possible, issue constituency letters. But I actually think that in memory of those who died in Piper Alpha, in relation to the importance of the Memorial Garden, the date of the anniversary is fixed, the location is fixed. In terms of the funding, I think people expect this chamber to be respectful and to treat these issues in relation to the memory of those that we're trying to honour. I think the contribution on behalf of the people of Scotland to the Memorial Garden was very appropriate. And I just regret that Lewis MacDonald is treating it in this way.
Question 2, Bruce Crawford.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what progress it is making in tackling homelessness.
Minister Margaret Burgess.
Homelessness continues to fall in Scotland, as shown by figures published earlier this month. In the first quarter of 2013, we saw an 11% fall in applications to local authorities from the previous year, and crucially falls in the number of households with children in temporary accommodation. This continues the positive trend of falls of homelessness in Scotland in recent years. Progress has been driven by the achievement of our internationally acclaimed 2012 homelessness target and our focus on prevention, working with local authority and others and supported by our investment in new affordable housing.
Mr Crawford.
I thank the Minister for her answer. I didn't sit beside her to make sure I got the answer I wanted. But according to the latest summary of the Stirling Council's Housing Advisory Group, the number of applicants in the Stirling Council area on the homelessness list has continued to fall. That's very encouraging news, but obviously there is still much to do. Will the Minister agree with me that we very much hope this trend will continue? And can she tell me what further action the Scottish Government and Stirling Council can take working together to help reduce homelessness rates still further?
Minister.
Thank you. Yes, I do agree that it's good news to see homelessness figures continuing to fall, and in Stirling they've fallen by 14%, which is higher than the national fall of 11%. And the progress is the result of adoption of housing options approach to preventing homelessness by local authorities and their partners, rather than a change in the underlying drivers of homelessness. And I attended an event this morning, a national homelessness event, looking very much about how we can continue with this and work together and develop further the regional hubs, of which Stirling is a member of one, to continue to prevent homelessness further. We have made significant progress in tackling homelessness, but independence would allow us to ensure that continues with more control over finances and threats from areas still controlled by the UK Government, as typified by welfare reform.
Mary Fee.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I ask the Minister what will be done to assist rough sleepers over the winter, and what additional assistance will be given to charities already carrying out tremendous work with rough sleepers?
Minister.
The Scottish Government continues to work with charities who support rough sleepers, and rough sleepers in Scotland, the numbers are reducing as well. We continue to work with charities to do that and reduce the number of homeless people. We have set up a number of our funds in terms of welfare reform mitigation. We're encouraging charities to ensure that anyone who is sleeping rough has access to those funds, as they should have, and we continue to support them through our Voluntary Housing Action Fund, where we fund a number of those organisations.
Question 3, Kenneth Gibson.
To ask the Scottish Government how it plans to boost vocational education and training in North Ayrshire.
Minister Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, consistent with the aims of our reforms, the recently merged Ayrshire College is expanding vocational education opportunities across North Ayrshire. The new college is itself a considerable boost for North Ayrshire and will continue to adjust its curriculum to reflect the needs of local employers. Moreover, in academic years 2012-13 and 2013-14, Ayrshire College has received additional funding of over £2.6 million from the Scottish Funding Council to deliver additional places for young people, women and adults returning to education.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Minister for her answer. In the year to September, youth unemployment in North Ayrshire fell from 560 to 350, a fall of 37.5% and the fastest decline in Scotland. Does the Minister agree that enhanced vocational education and training will reduce that number still further and also give older unemployed people the necessary skills to return to work?
Minister.
Yes, I do. And listening to the figures that Mr Gibson's quoting, I think I'm correct in saying that he's talking about the claimant count figures for 16 to 19-year-olds, which have fallen right across Scotland. And it is, of course, known the particular challenges of North Ayrshire to hear about that improvement. He might also be interested to know that the claimant count, which, although not a full estimate of youth unemployment, has also fallen across the 16 to 24-year-old cohort from 11% to 8.1%. But he's absolutely right about the importance of vocational education and training. Targeted, specific skill needs, meeting the needs of local employers will indeed boost the employability of learners of all ages, support growth and boost employability.
Question 4, Margaret McCulloch.
To ask the Scottish Government what impact independence would have on the Department for International Development's office in East Kilbride.
Minister Hamza Yousaf.
In Scotland's Future Your Guide to an Independent Scotland, on pages 365 and page 31 earlier in the document, we make it clear that international development is one of the areas where the Scottish and Westminster governments have a mutual interest to work closely together. Having people with the skills to deliver government priorities in Scotland is an asset. The Scottish Government will work with the Westminster Government to preserve continuity of employment for all civil servants in Scotland, either by transfer to the Scottish Government or continued employment with the Westminster Government, where their skills will still be required by that Government. This would provide for continuity of services and jobs on independence, including those that are in DFID in East Kilbride, without either government having to recreate significant new infrastructure. I should say, in stark contrast to the Scottish Government, which has a strong record on valuing public service, the Westminster Government is not operating a policy of no compulsory redundancies within the public sector, and recent examinations of DFID's own accounts 2011-2012 show that the UK Government plans to decrease the number of staff in East Kilbride from 2014 onwards.
Margaret McCulloch.
I thank the Minister for that in-depth answer. We were told that the White Paper would answer all our questions, but it doesn't make things any clearer at all for staff at DFID, a department which employs over 500 people in East Kilbride. The Scottish Government really can't seem to decide whether to assure civil servants in East Kilbride that they will seamlessly transfer to Scottish civil service or stick with the UK civil service that runs its overseas aid programme out of a foreign country. Will the Minister answer the questions the White Paper didn't and tell and confirm DFID staff in East Kilbride definitely what happens to Abercrombie House in the event of independence? What happens to the absolutely vital job base there? And why should those workers gamble their future on independence?
Minister.
Well, I actually did answer that question. I told her that actually we would, of course, preserve continuity of employment with the Westminster Government in negotiation. And page 49, of course, of the paper, it specifically mentions that one of the delivery functions in the International Relations and Defence Department of an Independent Scotland would be in East Kilbride. It literally mentions it on page 49. Maybe she should also talk to Michael McCann, of course, her Labour MP colleague, who said, "I've made it very clear in terms of DFID jobs that compulsory redundancies should be avoided at all costs, and I've asked the Minister to keep me updated with any developments. It seems to me that the UK Government isn't doing all it can to protect British jobs." In addition to that, what I would say is I would encourage her to look at the international development section in more detail. It has been welcomed by NIDOS, the Network of International Development Organisations in Scotland. who in particular welcome it because of its commitment to 0.7%, but also policy coherence and development. That said, an independent Scotland takes its commitment to international development very seriously. The priorities and the skills and the expertise that those in DFID have will be well used in an independent Scotland's international development function. We would not, for example, have a policy whereby we would do our development work but also undermine it by selling arms to people like Robert Mugabe, General Suharto, Hosni Mubarak and Saddam Hussein. And finally, I'm not going to take lectures from anybody in the Labour Party who in 13 years of government, when we were in a time of growth and a time of boom, couldn't find it once in those 13 years to commit to 0.7%, their international obligation. And it's taken a Conservative government, a Tory austerity hell-bent government, to put you to shame in that regard. So we have very much said, and we continue to say, those DFID staff will be absolutely protected. We preserve their continuity of employment, and I have requested twice to meet with the DFID Minister to discuss these issues, and hopefully on the third time of asking, she will be able to meet to discuss these issues.
If I'm going to make progress to the questions, can we have the questions a bit shorter and the answers considerably shorter? Question number 5, Anne McTaggart.
To ask the Scottish Government what support it provides to people who have experienced miscarriage.
Minister Michael Matheson.
Health professionals provide tailored care and support to people who have experienced miscarriage, and this may include further investigation or counselling as appropriate. Additionally, a patient may be referred to the appropriate voluntary organisation. During 2013, the Scottish Government has provided funding to several organisations who work in this field.
I thank the Minister for that reply. Organisations such as Scottish Care and Information and Miscarriage have been supporting mothers in my region of Glasgow since 1992 and have worked to identify and tackle the causes of miscarriage and stillbirth through expert research. Does the Scottish Government have any plans to review the level of funding or assist them and other similar charities in acquiring alternative funding streams?
Minister.
I met with SCIM last week to discuss some of these particular issues, and we obviously provide a grant of over £7,000 a year to them for the work that they undertake within the Greater Glasgow and Clyde area. Of course, there are a range of other organisations who work in this field as well, who we provide funding to assist them in helping to support families at that particular point. I've no doubt the SEIM will choose to make an application to the 16B funding stream, which opens before the end of this year, and of course their application will be considered alongside all of those other applications from similar organisations carrying out this type of work.
Question number 6, Alex Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it will take to improve safety on the A937 between Montrose and Lornskirk.
Minister Keith Brown.
The A937 is a local road, and responsibility for the road rests with Angus Council and with Aberdeenshire Council. For our part, the Government has provided £100,000 for the Access to Lornskirk study, which is being commissioned by Nestrans in partnership with Aberdeenshire Council and Transport Scotland, and that work aims to identify a preferred option at Lornskirk on the A90.
Alex Johnson.
The Minister will be fully aware that recent analyses of figures has indicated that this road is variously described as the most dangerous road in Scotland and one of the most dangerous roads in Europe. And the pinch point on that road is its crossroads with the A90, which is most definitely a trunk route. Will the Minister take this opportunity, given recent correspondence, to retask his civil servants to begin the process of finding ways of improving this junction rather than finding excuses for not doing it?
Minister.
I think Alex Johnson should be more careful with the way that he describes this road. The road that was described as being the most dangerous in Scotland was actually the local road, not the trunk road. The trunk road is a low, medium risk road. The high risk road was the local road. Obviously, we want to work with local authorities and others to try and improve road safety wherever we can, but we have so far in relation to the trunk road, which was not the road mentioned in Alex Johnson's original question. In relation to that road, though, we have had further measures in 2007, 2008. We've had reduced accident stats since that time. We've had a cost refinement exercise about the junction, and as I've mentioned, we're taking forward a design proposal with Nestrans to see what the best possible solution for the A90 and access to Lornskirk could be. And that, to me, suggests the Government has been very proactive in relation to this, although we do acknowledge the concerns which there are locally. I've met with the campaigners, talked to one of the campaigners just last week, and of course we will continue to listen to the campaigners and improve the road where we can.
Nigel Dawn.
Presiding Officer, can I say that I have recently written to the Angus and Aberdeenshire councils, whose responsibility, of course, this section of the road is, to ask them what they are doing to improve safety along it. It is an extraordinarily dangerous piece of road, we do know. I'm just wondering whether, given that I have the Minister here, whether I can ask whether the Government is able to do anything to help in that process, simply because it does adjoin a trunk road. Because I think the best brains really need to be applied not only to the junction at Lawrencekirk, which I know you're working on, but also to the stretch down to Hillside.
Minister.
I think it's worth saying that, as the Roads Authority, the Scottish Government has no authority to go onto another road and suggest or make improvements to it when another Roads Authority is responsible for it. But Nigel Donn is quite right to say, not least in relation to roads maintenance, that we do work closely with local authorities. And of course, if the local authorities or the Regional Transport Partnership come forward with the request to do that, then we're more than happy to work with them on that.
Question 7, Fiona MacLeod.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to promote Carers' Rights Day tomorrow.
Minister Michael Matheson.
On Carers' Rights Day and all year round, the Scottish Government supports unpaid carers and young carers to provide valuable care and support to their family, friends and neighbours. With partners, we are developing a Carers' Rights Charter, which will set out and consolidate existing rights. This will be widely available next year. Subject to the outcome of consultation and to parliamentary approval, the Scottish Government also intends to bring forward new legislation to support carers and young carers.
Fiona MacLeod.
I thank the Minister for that answer, and the First Minister's announcement of the Carers' Rights Bill at the Carers Parliament in October was very welcome. But can the Minister advise me how we can now, what powers we can now use to make councils such as East Dunbartonshire Council follow their duty to give carers their assessments? Minister.
Well, the carers legislation is clear that where carers request an assessment, the local authority must provide the assessment. The local authority must also notify carers of their entitlement to request an assessment. Now, some councils also provide carers with support without an assessment being undertaken. However, it's important that councils do undertake a good quality assessment of all carers who request them. As I mentioned, we'll also be consulting on the provisions of carers legislation, which will look at areas such as identification of carers, to carers assessment, to information and advice and support for carers. And the aim is to have a more consistent approach across the country in how we support better outcomes for carers, and to make sure that those who would benefit from a carers assessment have the ability to be able to obtain one.
Question 8, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how many stop and searches Police Scotland has carried out.
Cabinet Secretary Ken McCaskill.
The use of stop and search is an operational matter for Police Scotland. Since the formation of Police Scotland in April 2013, there have been approximately one stop and search per police officer per week. This amounts to 12,089 police officers having carried out 454,737 stop and searches. Stop and search is an effective tactic to take knives or other weapons off the street before they are used to commit violent crimes. It is also effective in recovering drugs or alcohol, which can reduce antisocial behaviour and blight local communities.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. Stop and searches have increased by 45% in Aberdeen since the inception of Police Scotland. The Chief Constable has stated that there are no targets for stop and search. Can the Cabinet Secretary assure me that he will keep a close eye on these statistics so that my constituents can be assured that this procedure is used only when there is suspicion of crime or during special operations?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I can. I think Mr Stewart makes a good point, because these matters are a matter of balance. I can confirm I've discussed this issue of stop and search with the Chief Constable. As Kevin Stewart says, there are no targets for numbers of searches, although helpfully there are percentage targets for positive searches. I'm reassured stop and search is an intelligence-led tactic Police Scotland uses appropriately to keep people and communities safe, but the Scottish Police Authority and Scottish Government will of course continue to monitor its use. I should also point out that if crimes of handling of offensive weapons have reduced by 60% since this government came to office, that is down in no small way to a visible police presence, to tough laws and to strict enforcement by our police officers.
Thank you. We now move to First Minister's questions.